The Secretary of State, John Kerry, joins us now from Boston. Mr. Secretary, thank you so much. And I want to start with the bottom line question. Do we have definitive proof that the Russians were directly involved in the downing of this airliner?
Well, Bob, when you say definitive proof, the investigation is going to draw conclusions that are, quote, definitive. What we have is a lot of evidence that points in a direction that raises very, very serious questions, including the fact that a few weeks ago we have a 150 vehicle convoy coming from Russia going into the east of Ukraine with tanks, artillery, multiple rocket launchers, armored personnel carriers turned over to the separatists. We know that there are Russians who are leaders of the separatists, some, not all, some. And we know that the Russians have armed the separatists, trained the separatists, support the separatists, and have to date not publicly called on the separatists to stand down or to be part of the solution. We know that from our own imagery, we see that an SA-11, which is what we have assessed this to be the type of surface-to-air missile because of the altitude, the plane was at 33,000 feet. We know they had an SA-11 right in the vicinity hours before this shoot. The social media has documented this. We know that immediately after the shoot, the social media documented the self-proclaimed defense minister of the People's Republic of Donetsk, as they call it. He was bragging on the social media about shooting down a transport plane. And then when people learned it was a civilian aircraft, they pulled that off of the social media. We have intercepted voices that have been documented by our people through intelligence as being separatists who are talking to each other about the shoot down. And we know that we have a video now of a transporter removing an SA-11 system back into Russia, and it shows a missing missile or so. So there's enormous amount of evidence, even more evidence than I just documented, that points to the involvement of Russia in providing these systems, training the people on them. We know that the separatists have shot down 12 aircraft in the last couple of months, among them 2 transport planes, but the evidence is quite enormous. Well, here's what's currently bothering everybody. Drunken separatists have been piling bodies into trucks and removing them from the site. We only had 75 minutes of access to the site on Friday, 3 hours of access yesterday, despite Mr. Putin and Russia saying they were going to make every effort to make sure there'd be a full and fair investigation, thorough, and the site would be protected. Because of Russia's linkage to these separatists, they have a greater ability to exert influence, and we need Russia to become part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Well, what else do we need to know after hearing what you have just outlined here? What else?
We need an investigation, not the Secretary of State just listing the things that we do know, but a full investigation with international investigators, with the trained personnel, with the people who can put all of the evidence together and draw the appropriate conclusions so that we don't have a he said, she said, finger pointing back and forth. People will draw their own conclusions. The evidence is there, but we need a full access to this site in order to conduct a thorough investigation.
Well, what if it does come down to, yes, the Russians are responsible for this, then what should the United States do? What should our response be?
Well, there are many things that are options and are already options, Bob. We're in conversation now with our European counterparts. We hope this is a wake-up call for some countries in Europe that have been reluctant to move. President Obama took steps unilaterally. He took them on his own the day before this event, and he imposed very tough new sanctions in the banking sector, in the energy sector, in the defense sector, and there are still other sanctions that could be put in place if it was necessary. Our hope is that President Putin will put the actions behind his words, that we can join together in order to help end this separatist effort, bring them into the politics of Ukraine, and try to help Ukraine to be able to move forward. And incidentally, in the last months, we've been successful in having an election in Ukraine, having a new president, in being able to have a new government formed. This deserves the support of Russia to be able to build a peaceful, not confrontational and separatist insurgency, but to create a peaceful process to be able to have a Ukraine whose sovereignty is respected and where it is not a pawn in some unnecessary struggle between East and West. We've said to Russia, we want Ukraine to be a bridge between the East and the West, and it can look in both directions. But the way Russia is currently playing this dual-track policy, say one thing, do another, is really threatening both larger interests as well as that region and threatening Ukraine itself.